At one night, Watson and Mary were sleeping and someone was knocking on the door. They wondered who could that be at that hour. Mary asked Watson to open up the door and he did it immediately. When he opened the door, they saw it was Kate Whitney. Inviting her in to enter the house, they asked her what she was doing at that hour at night. And so she started saying that her husband, Asa Whitney, has been lost for 2 days. She believes he is probably in another stopper at the Opium Den. She explained that she was terribly afraid of that part of town and asked Watson if he could find him for her. Watson, in a kindly way, agreed to do so.
Watson exits the house and goes to the smoky opium den. He goes in and asks himself, where can Isa be? He takes a look around and finds him. Isa seems fine after being found by Watson and feels good to see him. Watson responds, saying that his wife is worried that he's taking him home. Isa agrees and asks if Watson can find the manager to pay his bill. Watson agrees and goes looking for the manager. Without knowing, he walks past Holmes and receives an unexpected greeting. Watson, surprised by Holmes, asks him, Holmes, is that you? What are you doing here? Holmes stands up and tells Watson to find a cab for Isa and to meet him outside on the abandoned street.
Holmes and Watson meet outside. In an excited tone, Holmes apologizes for the disguise and explains Watson that the owner had abandoned him from the opium den and that he was looking for someone and he could use his help. Then he told him that he had a cab awaiting and said that he would explain everything on the way to his lodgings. Holmes and Watson got on the cab and seated facing each other. Watson, intrigued, asked what was it all about, and Holmes answered. He was looking for Neville St. Clair, a good, honest man that doesn't have a job nor any debts and has no reason for enemies. He's got a wife and kids. Every morning he took a walk downtown, and one day he leaves to walk as he normally does. And in that same morning, Miss St. Clair goes downtown to pick up a package she'd been expecting. When she was on her way back home, she sees her husband frankly waving at her from the top story of the very same opium den that they had already visited. Holmes explained that Neville was jacked backwards by something and that his wife freaked out and entered the opium den with the police to search the top room, but when they got there, the husband was gone. Holmes mentioned that they found a filthy vagabond called Hugh Bone, who apparently lived at the room. They also found some bloodstains in the room and some of Neville St. Clair's clothes. From the room, they could see a nearby river, where the police had found Neville St. Clair's overcoat, stuffed with coins. At the moment, Hugh Bone claimed that the bloodstains were from a cut on his finger, that he did not see Neville St. Clair, nor he know how Neville's clothes got into the room. Hugh Bone was arrested as suspect and was currently being held in the police station. Then, Watson asked Holmes what did he think about what happened to Neville St. Clair. Holmes answered that he honestly didn't know. But regardless, they must go to Mrs. St. Clair and give her the update of the situation, since she has been kind enough to lend him a room for his investigation.
Holmes and Watson reach Miss St. Clair's home. Miss St. Clair greets them, asking him if they have found something from her husband. Holmes says no. Miss St. Clair follows the conversation with another question, asking him if there were any bad news. Holmes answers again with a no. Then, Miss St. Clair asks Holmes for an opinion. She asks him if he believes that her husband is dead. Holmes says yes, and Miss Clair pulls out the letter and asks Holmes how can he explain this. Holmes, surprised, takes the note and starts reading it. The note was proof husband Neville was still alive, and Holmes asked Miss St. Clair about the movements of her husband when she saw him in the window of the smoky opium den, and gets to a conclusion. Holmes tells Watson that they're finished with today and tomorrow they're gonna visit Hugh Bond. Holmes and Watson wake up the next day and went to visit Hugh Bond on his cell. Sherlock and Watson sneak up a smear sponge against Hugh Bond's face to wake him up, and Holmes enthusiastically says, "I gave you Neville St. Clair." Watson, confused, asks Neville why is he dressed as a beggar. Neville explains that you can get a lot of money being a beggar. He comes each morning dressed as a beggar, earns a hefty sum of money, and comes back to the room to change back into his gentleman's clothes. But as he was changing into his gentleman's clothes, he saw his wife through the window and threw his hands up trying to cover his face. He didn't want her to know that he spends his mornings begging for money. So when he heard her coming upstairs to his room, he changed back into the beggar's clothes and tried to get rid of the evidence. He wanted to throw the clothes through the river and fill the clothes with coins to weight them down, but he got himself a cut on the finger trying to open the window. Watson asks Neville if he doesn't want his family to know that he's a beggar, and Neville says no, cause they'll be ashamed of him. Watson says to Holmes that they cannot convict a man on the charge of murdering himself, and that he can talk to the police and have this whole thing up. But there's one condition: Neville has to stop begging for money from now on. Neville accepts the conditions. Holmes closes this case saying that it's a well-done job, and asks Watson if he wants to go grab some breakfast. And happily and satisfied with the results, Watson says, "That sounds delightful."